Hello everyone, welcome back to some more spoilers. Now these are the spoilers from over the weekend. As we're now getting caught up here, we have a bunch of new cards from the new set coming out here in April, Strixhaven, School of Mages. We get the Harry Potter spin-off here that's not really Harry Potter, barely even Magic the Gathering at this point, but I guess we have some interesting cards here. We have Sapphire, Thunder, Conductor. Now these are the commander options from the commander decks. These are not from the actual set. So it's kind of like what they've been doing for Kaldheim, where you had Lathril, and then with Zendikar you had Anawan. Well, you get 5 of them here this time, so I think they're pretty interesting. But Sapphire, Thunder Conductor, 4 mana in Izzet colors for a legendary human shaman with Magecraft. So whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you scry 1. If that spell's mana cost is 5 or greater, you create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. I misspoke actually, it's mana value, so you can use this for X-costed spells and it'll count. If that spell's mana value is 10 or greater, Sapphire Thunder Collector deals 10 damage to an opponent chosen at random. And there's a typo there too, it's actually Thunder Conductor, but here in the text it says Sapphire Thunder Collector. So that's kind of funny. We get over here on the right, we have Willow Dusk Essence Seer, 3 mana Golgari colored Dryad Druid, a 3/3. With an ability of 1 and tap to choose another target creature, put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the amount of life you gain this turn, or the amount of life you lost this turn, whichever is greater. Activate only as a sorcery, so just a +1/+1 counter creature. Maybe you incorporate some kind of life gain in there, some kind of life loss. Certainly easy to do that in those 2 colors. And then we have Oscar the Reconstructor, so 4 mana Boros colored Giant Artificer, a 4/4. And he has Vigilance, so you can pay 1 and sacrifice an artifact. Target creature you control gets +2 power until end of turn. And then you can pay X mana and tap him to exile an artifact card with mana value X from your graveyard. Create 2 tokens that are copies of the exiled card, and you can only do that at sorcery speed. So that's pretty fun to have in an equipment deck or any kind of artifact deck. And then we have Brina the Demagogue, 3 mana Orzhov colored Bird Warlock, a 1/3 with flying. Whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, if that opponent has more life than another one of your opponents, that attacking player draws a card and you put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control. So this is something I noticed after looking over these cards the first time. There's kind of a group hug element to black and white here. So that would be interesting to see what we get, because black and white has pretty much been tokens, a life gain, something around that, but it hasn't really been group hug. And then we have Adrix and Nev, twin casters, so 4 mana for a Merfolk Wizard, a 2/2 with Ward of 2. So whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, counter it unless that player pays 2 mana. So if 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead, so pretty much a parallel lives, which on a commander option that can be pretty powerful. Doesn't have to be creatures, it could be treasure tokens, anything like that, and you're in perfect colors to get token copies. Then moving up here, we get to see some of these first planeswalkers. We saw Liliana and Kasmina the other day, but here we have Rowan, Scholar of Sparks, and she flips into Will, Scholar of Frost. So this is pretty much the new flip mechanic that we saw in Zendikar Rising, where you can pretty much just cast either side. But Rowan here is 3 mana in red for a 2 loyalty planeswalker. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Her +1 is she deals 1 damage to each opponent. If you've drawn 3 or more cards this turn, it deals 3 damage to each opponent instead. And then her -4 is you get an emblem with whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell. You may pay 2 mana if you do copy that spell, and you get to choose new targets. That's a really good emblem. Even though you do have to pay mana every time to do it, that's brilliant. Emblems don't go away, they're pretty cool. And Will, Scholar of Frost is 5 mana in blue for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. Instant and sorcery spells you cast also cost 1 less to cast. He has a +1 of up to 1 target creature has base power and toughness 0/2 until your next turn. His -3 is draw 2 cards, and his -7 is exile up to 5 target permanent cards. For each permanent exiled this way, its controller creates a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. So I'm not going to lie to you, I think Rowan is a lot better. However, it's nice that you get to choose from both. So if you need a little bit more removal, you need to control the board, I think Will is the commander, but if you want to really go off with your instants and sorceries, Rowan's probably the better choice. So continuing, we get Dragon's Guard Elite here on the right, 2 mana Human Druid in green, a 2/2 with Magecraft whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Dragon's Guard Elite. And then you can pay 6 mana later on to double the number of +1/+1 counters on her. We have Archmage Emeritus. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you get to draw a card. So that's brilliant. I mean, that's amazing card draw. It's totally going to see play in Commander. We have a ton of similar creatures. We have one for artifacts, like whenever you cast an artifact, you get to draw a card. That one has seen a bunch of play before. And even though blue has better card draw, if you have a card like this, that can pretty much double your card draw, or at least add an extra for every time you're casting a cantrip, I think that's pretty solid. So we get another card here, we get Eager First Year. It's a common. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, she gets +1 power until end of turn. Professor of Symbology introduces a new keyword here. When she enters the battlefield, you learn. And learn is a keyword that says you may reveal a lesson card you own from outside of the game and put it into your hand or discard a card to draw a card. So that's actually really cool, and if lesson cards are great, then this will be a pretty decent 2 mana uncommon. Moving up here, we have Pop Quiz. You draw a card and learn, so that's another learn card. And then we have these lesson cards, which these are just sorceries, but there's a subtype there for sorceries now. It's a lesson. We have Pest Summoning, so 3 mana in Golgari. You create 2 1/1 black and green pest creature tokens with when this creature dies, you gain a life. You have Confront the Past, another lesson card. Black and an X for 2 different modes here. You can return target planeswalker card with a mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, or the other mode, remove twice X loyalty counters from target planeswalker and opponent controls. So if there's a ton of planeswalkers in Standard, I'm sure this is going to be useful. Then we have Lorehold Apprentice here, another Magecraft card. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, until end of turn, spirit creatures you control gain tap. This creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. So that's actually pretty cool. There are a lot of spirit decks. If you're using Keycar, you get a lot of spirit tokens that way, so you can cast a bunch of instants and sorceries and then tap your spirits to deal damage. And then we have Prismari Apprentice. So Prismari, I believe, is one of the houses, in addition to Lorehold there. Another Magecraft card. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, it can't be blocked this turn. If that spell has a mana value 5 or greater, put a +1/+1 counter on Prismari Apprentice. Then we have Stormkiln Artist, cool looking dwarf here, 4 mana. It gets +1 power for each artifact you control. And Magecraft, whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you create a treasure token. Then we have Quadrix Apprentice, another Magecraft card. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you look at the top 3 cards of your library. You can reveal a land from among them and put that card into your hand, and then you put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Silverquill Apprentice is another Magecraft card. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, target creature gets +1 power until end of turn. So all of these are going to revolve around spell casting because, you know, this is pretty much another Harry Potter school. What is it, Hogwarts? Witherbloom Apprentice is the Golgari one with Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain a life. Now that's actually pretty good. The other ones are rather tame. I think that's one. If you're going to play any kind of instant or sorcery strategy using Golgari, this one might be one to look out for. And then we get these lands here. We get 1 of each, which I believe this finishes the cycle. So those lands going all the way back to Shadows over Innistrad. For the longest time, we went without finishing the other 5. So we finally get the other 5 here. So you get red and blue, you get red and white, you get white and black, you get black and green, and then you get green and blue. So we have First Day of Class, another learn card, but it's a red instant common. We have Expanded Anatomy over here, which is pretty much another lesson card. We put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature, gains vigilance until end of turn. And then we have Waterfall Aerialist, flying with Ward 2. And then we have Plarg, Dean of Chaos. We get these Dean creatures, which are probably going to make pretty cool commander options. Dean can also flip into Augusta, Dean of Order, so you have Dean of Chaos and Dean of Order. For 2 mana and red, you have an Orc Shaman, a 2/2 legendary creature. He can tap for you to discard a card, and then you draw a card, and then he has an ability of 5 mana and tap to reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary non-land card with a mana value 3 or less. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost, So I think that's pretty decent, especially for the cheap 2 mana. And then Augusta Dean of Order is a 1/3 human cleric for 3 mana. Other tapped creatures you control get +1 power, other untapped creatures you control get +1 toughness. Whenever you attack, untap each creature you control, then tap any number of creatures you control. So you get to manipulate which creatures get that plus power or that plus toughness. Overall, not something I think is super powerful, but it might be interesting to fool around with. Then we get this card up here, we get Torrent Sculptor, which flips into the card down here, Flamethrower Sonata. So the Sculptor is 4 mana for a Merfolk Wizard, a 2/2, with Ward 2, and when Torrent Sculptor enters the battlefield, exile an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to put a number of +1/+1 counters on Torrent Sculptor equal to half that card's mana value rounded up. And then Flamethrower Sonata is 2 mana for a red sorcery where you discard a card and then draw a card, and then when you discard an instant or sorcery card this way, it deals damage equal to that card's mana cost to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. We get another Dean here, we get Uvilda, Dean of Perfection, 3 mana blue Djinn Wizard. A 2/2 you can tap so you can exile an instant or sorcery card from your hand, and put 3 hone counters on it. It gains at the beginning of your upkeep. If this card is exiled, remove a hone counter from it, and when the last hone counter is removed from this card, if it's exiled, you may cast it. It costs 4 less to cast this way. And then Nasari, Dean of Expression, is 5 mana for a 4/4 Efreet Shaman. With, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of each opponent's library until end of turn. You may cast spells from among those exiled cards, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. And whenever you cast a spell from exile, put a +1/+1 counter on Nasari, Dean of Expression. So you kind of get a combination here of Atali and Send Triplets. I think that'll be pretty powerful. And then moving up here, we have Valentine, Dean of the Vayne. So a 1 mana black vampire warlock, a 1/1 with menace and lifelink, that's pretty cool. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead, and when you do, you may pay 2 mana if you do create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with. When this creature dies, you gain 1 life. That is incredibly powerful for just 1 mana. Granted, he's only a 1/1 and easy to kill. That ability is so underrated. To exile creatures when they die, and it's all your opponent's creatures too, it's not yours. He flips into Lizette, Dean of the Root. So you have a 4 mana human druid, a 4/4 in green. Whenever you gain life, you may pay 1 mana. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and those creatures gain trample until end of turn. And then we have Kian, Dean of Substance, so 3 mana for a green elf druid, a 2/2. She can tap to exile the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you put it into your hand, otherwise put a study counter on it. And you can pay 5 mana, create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token, and then put a +1/+1 counter on it for each different mana value among non-land cards you own in exile with study counters on them. And then the other side is Imbraham, Dean of Theory, 4 mana blue bird wizard, a 3/3 with flying. That's pretty cool. You have an ability here of X and 2 blue and a tap. Exile the top X cards of your library and put a study counter on each of them. Then you may put a card you own in exile with a study counter on it into your hand. So those two sides kind of work well with each other. And then we get another flip creature. We get Shale, Dean of Radiance, 2 mana bird cleric in white, a 1/1 with flying and vigilance. This bird cleric can tap to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. So that's pretty sweet. And the flip side is Ambrose, Dean of the Shadow, or just Dean of Shadow. 4 mana in black for a human warlock, a 4/4. That can tap to put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature, then Ambrose, Dean of Shadow, deals 2 damage to that creature. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, you get to draw a card. So this would be pretty cool if you want to play those dinosaurs that when they're dealt damage, they have abilities, but it's also great for tokens. So if you have 1/1 tokens, you put a +1/+1 counter on them and then deal 2 damage to them, and then draw a card that way. So moving up here, we have another lesson card. We have Introduction to Prophecy, 3 mana. You scry 2 and then draw a card. It's colorless, so it's quite flexible. And then we have Shadrick, Silverquill, Elder Dragon, 5 mana, white and black, a 2/5 flying with double strike. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may choose 2. Each mode must target a different player. So this is where we get the group hug element. The first mode is target player creates a 2/1 white and black inkling creature token with flying. The second mode is target player draws a card and loses a life. And then the third mode is target player puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature they control. So you can choose 2 opponents, or you can choose yourself and 1 opponent. But as it says, you have to choose different players, so only one can benefit you. And then the last card here to show you today is Introduction to Annihilation, a 5-mana colorless lesson card. Exile target non-land permanent, its controller draws a card. So other than that, we got a lot of these alternate art cards. They're just reprints of cards we've already had, which at this point I have to admit I'm not really impressed. It seems awfully gimmicky, and going all the way back to, let's talk about Battle for Zendikar. The expeditions were cool when they first started, but it just seems like every set has their expeditions. Well, actually, we get some more comments here, but nothing really special. We get some more cards. We get more cards here that are basically the expeditions of this set, but there's going to be a legendary edition, there's going to be a collector's edition, something filled with a lot of these cards, and this is really the only way that you get the best artwork in a set, is through all these overpriced cards. I mean, I remember looking at sets and just being amazed at all the artwork that was within the actual set, like you opened up a pack, and then you saw something really cool looking. Now it's every card in the main set pretty much blends in with the other cards. They all have like a similar art style. Save for maybe like Seb McKinnon, 99% of the artwork you're going to see in the main set is just bland. So I'm not really impressed by any of these. I know a lot of people get into the collector's items, and it's just never been for me. I've been pretty simple. You even get some of these, which the artwork looks fantastic. But again, it's like all these different artworks. I don't even know if this is from Strixhaven, but this is all we're getting here. We're getting different artwork. It is actually from Strixhaven, Mystical Archive, so you get, anime, manga, old Japanese art style. It's very gimmicky, and I have no interest for it because there's so much of it. There is a definite oversaturation of this stuff. I would be fine if you made like 1 or 2 cards like this, but every set now, you have all these borderless cards, you have all these extended art cards, you have all these different specialty art series cards, and it's so difficult to follow because they do it so often. Why am I supposed to care? Why is anyone supposed to care? But anyway, don't let that take away from the actual set itself, which I think is pretty cool. I think if it's very instant and sorcery heavy, it's actually going to end up being a pretty good set, because that is relatively competitive. If you have Magecraft, you have things that trigger. I think it's going to be a little bit more competitive because of that. But this right here, Shadrick Silverquill, if that was like the one alternate art card that you had in a set, people would be more excited for it. That's just me though. So let me know what you think about this whole set here. We're definitely going to be getting more spoilers here soon, so look out for those videos. Void here signing off. Hope you all have a wonderful day.